I recently saw a post on one of the gun boards where a new firearms owner was asking some basic questions, and he immediately got roasted. People were saying, "Where were you these last several years? Where were you all this time? And you probably voted for the anti-gunners in the past, huh?" And I saw this, and I was a little bit discouraged. And to tell you the truth, I've actually seen a lot of this behavior from the gun community, and don't get me wrong, it's not unique to the gun community. You see it in the car community. You probably even see it in something like the Beanie Baby community, People arguing amongst each other all the time. But it kind of reminded me of something I've seen quite a bit, and I figured I would make a video on this because we do have a lot of new gun owners coming in. A lot of people want to get into guns, and we can't always be arguing like this. And going off the last video, where I talked about expanding the Overton window, we're not going to be able to expand the Overton window if we're not united. So, the reason I started my website and my podcast group was to kind of get people interested in firearms and get people that maybe weren't normally interested in firearms, basically to essentially normalize gun ownership. And that's still my aim today. I would love to see everyone trying to do that, to try to normalize gun ownership. Like we talked about in the last video, expand the Overton window. We need to kind of normalize dialogue about firearms and firearms ownership. One thing you notice about the other side is that anti-gunners tend to stick together. All right, they have a new idea and they all follow along and they stick to that. Now, I'm not saying we should always stick together on everything. If someone comes in and says we shouldn't own AR-15s, obviously we should condemn that and tell them why we should have AR-15s. You don't even really need to explain yourself. But my point is that the anti-gunners tend to stick together. You rarely see them arguing amongst themselves. Someone in Congress might have a new idea, and all the anti-gunners just jump on board, right? Politicians, they just all jump on board on these new gun legislation, and they all back it. And then depending on what state you're in, eventually the governor is going to sign it into law. So we need to be able to unite a little bit more and stop arguing amongst ourselves so much. So what are some of the ways I see this? And again, this is not everyone in the firearms community. It's actually a minority of people in the firearms community. Every time I go to SHOT Show, it's such a awesome, welcoming environment, and everyone's really cool. Pretty much everyone's really cool. I talked to one famous firearms YouTuber. I was talking to him in the media room, and he was saying, I've only met maybe a few people in all the years doing this where I just really want nothing to do with them in the firearms community. So we're actually pretty good at doing this. It mostly shows up on the internet, on the gun boards, stuff like that, on Instagram. So what are some of the ways we do this in the firearms community? Well, one of the first ways I could think of is arguing semantics. So there's a new firearms owner, and he comes in, he posts the word clip. And someone corrects him and says, well, actually, it's not a clip, it's a magazine. Things like this, especially amongst a new firearms owner, are kind of pointless. If you really feel the need to correct them, then just say something like, well, technically it's a magazine, but no worries on that. You're a new firearms community. You're new in the firearms community, and then answer his question. Maybe you could do something like that. Maybe someone asks about different parts of an AR-15. They don't know any better. Just educate them a little bit. Don't jump on them. Don't criticize them for that. Another way we could do this in the firearms community that I've seen is criticizing firearms choice, actually. So let me tell you a quick little story. One time we went with one of our friends shooting. He came along, and he wasn't a big-time shooter, but he was interested. He liked shooting. And what did he bring along? He brought along his High Point. And some of you might be laughing right now, because if you don't know, a High Point is a really cheap handgun. And fortunately for this guy, we knew he could take the jug, and we can criticize him and bust him up a little bit, bust his chops. But some people might actually get their feelings hurt. If there's a new gun owner and they have a Kel-Tec or something like a High Point, and you make fun of them for that, then they might never want to come back and join the community. Other things I see people making fun of each other for are using pistol braces, like, oh, you're not the real deal. You don't have an SBR. I think stuff like this is pretty pointless, and we should try to prevent that. Another way we do this in the firearms community is arguing approach or criticizing someone's approach. I remember a few years ago there was someone on Instagram, and there was nothing wrong with his content per se. Like, he wasn't he wasn't anti-AR-15s or something like that. He was posting about firearms all the time, but he made a few posts, and I don't want to give too much away because I don't want you guys figuring out who it was and then commenting about how you remember that in the comments. But anyway, there were actually some people in the gun community and one big Instagram page. I don't know if this guy's still around. I don't remember his name. Anyway, so it doesn't matter. And he kind of launched a raid on this kid. He was a pretty young kid, maybe 19, 20-ish. And he was just criticizing him, saying he's a dork, he's just some kid, whatever. And I just didn't see the point in that. So, maybe things like this, we don't need to go about it this way. Maybe you can message your friend, like, that guy's kind of, or I don't like his approach or whatever. But you don't need to take this public because, again, we need to stay united as one group in the firearms community. I've also seen it where people get one point wrong and people just kind of jump on them and they criticize them for getting 1 point wrong. And I think this is kind of unhealthy. Sort of like when there's a new firearms owner and he says something like clip and people kind of jump on him. I just don't think it's necessary. Get 1 point wrong, no big deal. I remember my friend had a pretty big YouTube channel. Now he's going in a different direction, still with firearms. But anyway, he had a pretty popular video. I think it had 500,000 views. And it was well liked, but there were some people, and he was telling me there were some people that were just so upset because they didn't agree with his opinions on certain firearms. Okay, again, it's his opinion, and they were, certain people are just so vocal. I don't know why they get so hostile if they don't agree with your opinion. It was his opinion. Things like that we don't need to get in the weeds with and just criticize each other over. Another thing I've seen is people criticizing the way that people express their support for the Second Amendment. Maybe this ties in a little bit with people's approach to Instagram, people's approach to their YouTube channels. I remember people criticizing the way people went about certain rallies. Or I could think of one where people said, "Oh, you shouldn't have been open carrying." Well, that's your opinion, but we don't need to criticize them. That was their choice at this Second Amendment rally to do that. I remember in California there was a rally, and you guys know that some gun rallies don't have a very big turnout. And someone was criticizing the rally because they said it was pathetic and they didn't have a big enough turnout. But again, did this person go to the rally? I don't know. I don't know if this person did. But even if 20 people show up to a rally somewhere like California or New York, we shouldn't criticize them for going. They're actually trying to expand our rights and help our cause and help protect the Second Amendment. So these are just some of the ways I could think about how we fight each other in the community and why we should stop. Remember, the anti-gunners are very good at sticking together and staying united, and we need to do that as well. Again, I don't make any money off my YouTube channel. I don't make any money off my website. There are no ads on my website, no ads on my YouTube channel, and no ads on my podcast. So if you feel like this was helpful, maybe you know someone in the gun community that needs to hear this, feel free to share it, like, comment, subscribe, and again, you can always follow me on Instagram at GroupCoalition. And my podcast is on iTunes. It's called the GroupCoalition Podcast. Anyways, hope you guys have a good day, and I'll be making some more content soon. Keep fighting for the Second Amendment.